The Wellness Show, episode 222. This is your host, Tyhson Banighen, the Luminator, your number one health, wealth, and enlightenment activator. Need some help? Give me a call toll free, 1-866-369-7464. Welcome to the Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more. Welcome to the Wellness Show, and today I'm excited to have Natasha Rosewood back again. She's a master psychic, and I have to tell you that she's the real deal. I had a number of readings from her, and it's all coming true. So if you want to know, have a peek into the future, what your life could be all about, then she's the lady you need to get hold of. And this is your host, Tyhson Banighen. I'm also intuitive. I don't do readings, but I do help you get from where you are to where you want to be in the shortest amount of time possible. And I bring you into your own personal enlightenment. So we're going to have an interesting conversation today because the topic is, what does grief have to do with intuition? Which has got me really curious because I don't know the answer to that. So welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thank you, Tyhson, for having me. We finally got on.
Yeah, we've been playing with technology, so we're going to bless all the technology that allowed us to be having this conversation right here, right now.
God bless it, yes.
Yeah, God bless. 90-10. Yes. So how did you come across the topic of grief? Was that part of your own experience that you had a lot of grief in your life, or was it working with clients, or how did grief become a focus of what you wanted to talk about?
Well, over the years, Tyhson, and I've been reading for 45 years in total.
Wow.
25 years in a professional business, that when I read people, I find that they often come up, or I come up in their energy against this big wall, and I recognize it as being based in sadness or unresolved grief, unforgivingness, all this kind of thing. And it's like a layer of cloud that's in the psyche, in the physical body, can manifest into disease. And so I've always been big on, let's go to the root cause of that and let's expiate that or dissolve it or forgive it or whatever we need to do to have that kind of disappear, so that the energy can go down through the heart chakra into the solar plexus, and that we can connect with our own gut. But really it became much more obvious to me when clients came to my psychic development workshops, and we'd start going into our intuition. We're doing these exercises, and often clients would start to cry, and old stuff would come up. And first we'd find that we'd have to deal with what that was and forgive it and release it, relinquish it. And then the intuition could work. It could go all the way down. I've definitely had my own experiences with grief. I've had a lot of loss in my life, which I think makes me good at helping people with grief. And I actually feel that I'd like to write a book on grief, because in our North American and European culture, we're not very good at grieving. We're not very good at giving ourselves permission to let it all hang out and howl and scream and cry and let people know that we're in pain. We are trained to kind of suck it up and stiff upper lip, all that kind of thing. And that does a lot of damage to our psyche and our bodies.
Wow. Yeah, what an introduction. So what, in your experiences, are the root causes of grief?
Well, obviously pain, but what I'm really talking about is unresolved grief, because we all grieve, our dogs, when our parents get divorced, people dying, maybe loss of a job, loss of a dream. And so what I'm really talking about is where people haven't grieved properly, and that they need to go back into their grief and give themselves permission to cry or be tired and tell somebody. The more we share our pain, the the less it hurts us. And I think forgiveness of guilt is at the root of all this anguish.
Yeah, I think that's part of our cultural conditioning. So I was wondering how much of this is really part of our collective unconsciousness, the original sin, and we could never get it right, and, right if we tried. And, it just seems that our whole cultural fabric or the matrix is built on we aren't good enough, and therefore somehow we have to strive to be better. And by the way, you're never going to get it right anyway. So there's been a lot of reasons to have grief on multiple levels. And then on top of that, it's the sort of grief I would think that you were talking about too, which is really, the lost dog or the lost parent or loved one or whatever. So we sort of have multiple layers of grief.
Yeah, and Tyhson, also I want to talk about, and you kind of touched on it there, is past lives. A lot of my clients will come to me and I'll recognize that this grief is very, very old, and they have no clue why they're afraid or why they can't get on with their soulmate or why the color red really upsets them, because those things trigger that thing from that old unresolved grief from maybe, I've got one client 700 years ago. It's like, isn't it time to let that go? Yeah. So it's about bringing it to consciousness and reworking it and forgiving and having compassion and then releasing.
So you were talking about, the connection between the heart and the solar plexus, and, and that is connection is broken by grief. So tell me more about that.
Okay, so what happens is, I think, that our energy is like chi, it's like a river, it's flowing. And then whenever we have an experience and we get stuck in the experience, and I have a friend that deals with a lot of trauma, and she will always say that the trauma needs to be completed. So, for example, if you have a horrible experience, let's just take a car accident, for example, and in your mind, after the car accident, you will keep replaying the same old scenario just before this thing happened, and it's like on a loop. And so we've got to undo the loop and keep the energy going. But what happens is the energy gets stuck. Consequently, a lot of people who come to me say they feel stuck. And the first thing I go into is there a layer of grief there? And is there an particular incident that started that grief and that caused that energy to become stuck? So when I work with people like that, we become unstuck. Sometimes I send them, and frequently, to grief counselors. I'm always looking for good grief counselors because I'm not trained as a counselor, but I'm very good at pinpointing what needs to happen next for the client to move forward. Sometimes a past life regression is fantastic because that will, on an unconscious level, they'll be able to release that and re-empower themselves. So the grief, often in the process, because we're not facing it, there's anger, unforgiveness, resentment, rage, sometimes stuck in our being because we haven't given ourselves permission to be validated or release or forgive. And that can obviously build. And to me, grief is like a tumor, and it starts off maybe as a pea, but if we don't really resolve it, it gets to be big like a tumor, and then sometimes it can literally become a tumor in our bodies or some other disease. So I always say to people, get it out of the body, cry, stamp your feet, rage healthily, don't hurt anybody, especially yourself. Don't try and use alcohol or drugs or to bury the pain. We want to feel the pain. We want to get it out of the body. So there's definitely different ways we can do that. And I do have on my website 10 tips for helping to resolve grief. So people can go there and look at that.
So grief then really is a precursor or an indication emotionally or psychologically that there's unresolved trauma or conflict that needs to be dealt with, and that if we respect that grief for what it is, that it's our body's trying to tell us something that it wants to heal, then it's something we can welcome rather than run away with, because it's allowing us to go deeper and let go of it, like you say.
Exactly.
Go through it.
Yeah.
It's interesting in that it reminds me of learning to do instant miracle, where for most people if you help them just identify the strongest part of where the pain is, and this is maybe physical pain, could be emotional pain, and have them just sit with it and breathe, that it starts to dissipate. So a lot of our avoidance, whatever we do,
Right.
backwards or psychologically burying it or being out of
Exactly.
whatever, is a lot of fear-based that isn't really, when we actually sit with the fear, it can dissipate quite quickly.
Yeah, and having it validated. I agree with you totally on that. I think emotional freedom technique is a lovely way of getting back into that and feeling it and just sitting with it and saying, how do I feel now as an adult? This thing happened to me when I was 3 years old. The way I saw it at 3 is going to be very different when I see it at the age of 33. And I actually had a story about that, about a client who came to me, and I just felt this kind of stuckness in her being. She just got married. She was a beautiful girl. And I felt there had been some abuse in her family when she was 3 by a family member. And she just burst into tears. And she, right then and there, because I had recognized it and validated it for her, she did a lot of releasing. I did suggest she go on for further counseling. She'd never told another soul, but just being able to share it with another human being and have it validated was so powerful for her. And she followed my advice and came back 6 months later, and her whole physiology had changed. She was still beautiful, but she looked so different and lighter. And it was just because she had properly taken care of that grief and rage and confusion in her own psyche. So just validating, just me saying, oh, I feel like when you were 6, this happened to you. Oh my gosh, that must have been so painful for you. Tell me about it. Or we don't have to know what happened, but if I can recognize the energy and give them tools to step back into their power, and so that they overcome the pain and they've learned from it. That's the other thing about unresolved grief. When we just let it sit there and we don't go into it, we don't re-experience it in a healthy way, we can't learn from the experience. It's just a bad experience.
Right.
But, experiences are just experiences, whether they're good or bad. That's how we judge them.
Yeah, it's sort of like being in a car, what wants to move forward, but you're stuck in grief, so you've got your foot on your gas and on the brake, and all you're doing is burning rubber.
Exactly.
You're spinning your wheels and making a pretty stinky mess out of it.
Exactly.
Well, some of the grief that with people that I work with, a lot of it is, some of it's past life, absolutely. Some of it's in the womb, but a lot of it is in our misconception of what something happened to us between the ages 0 and 7, where we don't have the full capacity to understand what these adults are doing or saying or what they're saying to us, so we can misinterpret it or not understand why we chose our parents anyway. Why did we choose somebody who is being so difficult with us? And when we go back and understand why we did that, on the soul level, then, like you said, then it starts to have some clarity around it, and then we can release the emotion because we understand why did we choose that for ourselves. It isn't somebody doing something to us, it's something we chose to have done to us for our own soul growth. And that's a big quantum jump for lots of people to understand. What do you mean? They're not doing that to me? What do you mean I actually chose that?
Exactly.
Situation?
I know. I thought about my own parents. What was I thinking? I could have had a V8, but later on I understood because they were very challenging for me in 2 very different ways. God bless them. They were doing the best they could with what they had available to them. But later on, when I understood, I went, oh, that's what that's about.
Yeah.
But you bring up a really good point there because fundamentally, and this has to, again, to do with grief and intuition and the kind of the conflict we sometimes feel, is that fundamentally we do love ourselves. And so when we go into our intuition and knowing that we've gone through this painful experience and maybe we've chosen it for a reason, we go, well, I don't think I can trust my own inner voice because last time I did that, I got into that big mess over there. So I'm not going to trust me again. I'm going to ask somebody or something outside of myself. And that's why we don't, we're always looking on Wikipedia or Google or Uncle Fred or whoever it is we go to for that other information. But, you know, really, can I trust me? I don't think so. So again, dealing with the grief and having people recognize, like you just said, that they did choose that experience and this might be the lesson and this is therefore the gift, then people feel like, oh, okay, so I was smart in doing that.
Yeah,
That was
I
part
didn't
of
do
my
that
process.
wrong after all.
Exactly.
Well, so you're saying that, so it isn't part of the problem that if people are identifying that, though that was false information from my intuition and I did it and it brought me a lot of grief, isn't that part and parcel of the fact that maybe they're tuned into the wrong part of who they are and getting the messages from, say, their lower self or their human mind consciousness rather than their connection to source?
Exactly. I think the intuition is speaking to them, but they're not listening because they're going to their ego mind in their head and going, well, what appears real to me right now in the physical realm on this level. And as you know, Tyhson, I call the ego the P-brain because it's like this little filter through which we observe our world rather than going deep inside. And I think, of course, the intuition and our inner voice and our spirit guides and angels are talking to us, but we're going, well, that doesn't make sense. It feels right, but no, I think I'll go down this road and make another mistake.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is really, really powerful. What you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that you've always got your guidance and intuition is there. It's 24/7, the synchronicity in your life, and ease and grace is always available for you. Another way of saying it is we're already enlightened, but we get our brain in the way and want to say, oh my God, that, you know, this is how I need to interpret it because of whatever social conditioning or my parents said or whatever, we get in our own way. And therefore, don't pick up our psychic clues or don't interpret our guidance correctly, and don't get the clues of the synchronicity that's always available in our life. Is that
Exactly.
what you're saying? Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, people say, oh, I don't get any. I say, watch for the signs. I say, well, I don't get any signs. And I said, your whole world is one big fat sign right in front of you. And the feelings in your body. So what I've been doing recently with people, if they have a decision to make, for example, should I marry Bill or should I marry Fred or should I stay, should I go, kind of visualize what each scenario looks like step into it and see how is it feeling in the body, which one feels more exciting, which one feels more loving or warm and fuzzy. But we do know, and our intuition speaks to us through our spirit, and our spirit speaks to us through our body, and it shows up, courses through our veins and lands up in a gut somewhere. And we all have our own body signs. Some people get itchy palms or, you know, an achy knee or something as something's coming in, or a dream. But, you know, just the feeling, what is the feeling? That is your intuition. That's telling you the truth.
I like that. Again, you're making a really clear distinction that we sometimes believe that this is a world of human suffering, and, you know, from the Buddhist perspective, you know, it's pain and suffering. But in actual fact, it's the lower dimension, and when we get in our own way, that's full of pain and suffering because, like you're saying, you're not listening to your guidance or not being able to interpret it or allow it into your life. But when you're in that divine flow, then there is ease and grace, and there isn't pain and suffering.
Exactly.
There's joy. And so your basic fundamental premise that if it feels good is most likely getting you closer to being in the zone and connected to source. And if it feels yucky or you feel it in your gut, it's then it is your ego most likely, or your misinterpretation that's in the way.
Yeah. Well, I talk a lot about frequency, Tyhson. So, you know, when you go to the paint store and you want the color, let's just say green, and you get all the different shades from light to dark. Yeah. And I try and explain that our frequency and energy is like that. And when we're in the highest frequency, we're into the white. where in the lowest frequency we're into the darkest shade, or in the black. And so, and as according to the laws of physics, like attracts like. So whatever frequency you're in, that's probably what you're going to attract. And so there was a client a little while ago, and it was kind of sad because she'd had one grief which she hadn't grieved for. So then she's in this low frequency, she's depressed, she's enraged, she's miserable, she's alone, she's feeling very alone, she's alienating people, sometimes family and friends, and then something else happens on that frequency because she's in the same frequency. So then these events compound, and the grief compounds, and I helped her kind of break that cycle by explaining that to her. What is the original grief? What's the original pain? Because it's going to be echoed throughout all these other events. And it's just the universe's way. It's not God or anybody having a bad day and punishing you. It's just the universe's way of saying, come on, wake up, love yourself enough that you can have this beautiful realm, but you've got to let this negativity go. And the way you do that is forgive and have compassion for yourself and express it. Express it.
Yeah, that's a point that you said. We tend to say, well, that maybe it's karmically because of our karma, or that God's punishing us, or some external force to us is not treating us well, and ain't that awful? But what you're saying is, no, it's really your higher soul essence that's prodding you, or helping you wake up to who you truly are, which is a different way of looking at it. Yeah.
Well, I went through a lifetime of that, Tyhson, so I'm an expert on being prodded and waking up.
Yeah.
I finally did it.
I'm an expert on misinterpreting and thinking that God's angry, or somebody's angry, or, I'm bad, rotten, and wrong, and God, I can't get it right,
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people in our culture that we tend to think that there's some external judge, whether it's God or whatever, that we have to succumb to. And so can be really hard on ourselves and be our world's worst critic, because we're believing that if we don't judge ourselves first, then somebody is going to judge ourselves even worse. So
yes.
And what you're really teaching people is the reverse, is the learning how to love yourself no matter what. These are just lessons to be learned, and not punishment.
Yeah, and when we are free of grief, it's not to say that we're perfect, like you said before, but because we're in this higher, healthier vibration and the energy is flowing, things do tend to work. And getting back to the frequency, it's like, if we all have the intuition anyway, but some are so entrenched in the darkness they can't see the light. But when you kind of climb up into those lighter shades and you come out into the light, you can kind of see forever in some ways. And even if you can't see forever, you'll just sit there and trust that this love and this white light that you're in is your protection. And I have to say, since I've been in these higher frequencies for myself, life has been, dull. I don't want to, curse that, but it just feels like everything is so much easier than it used to be, because from my own experience, coming from a dysfunctional family and having a psycho mother and having this unresolved grief that I was dealing with, things used to be so hard and such a struggle, and I would expect things to go wrong. Now I expect things to go right, and I don't even really have to give it a lot of energy, because I set the intention and then I let the universe bring it to me. If it's right for me, it will come. If it's not, it won't.
So if the dominant vibration in that whole experience with a dysfunctional family was close to grief, what is the more predominant emotion that you're feeling now? Is it more like joy, or is it
joy? Joy, absolutely. Excitement. And anytime I do feel, if you watch the 6 o'clock news or you listen to certain politicians speaking, that's designed, I think, to kind of suck us all down into this dark abyss again, right? And so, I find myself going, ooh, 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 and then I catch myself and I go, no, that's not the truth. That's not the truth of the way the universe functions. That's some people's truth. And so I just go cancel, cancel, love, love. Or if I do have to make a decision and I'm thinking now, am I afraid or is this intuition? So for example, I love to go skiing, but I'm terrified of heights. So before I get on that chairlift, I go, oh my God, it's going to fall off and blah, blah, blah. And I go through the fear and I let the fear kind of run through me. And I ask myself the question, is this intuition or is it something I'm making up based on somebody else's experience? Because I've never fallen out of a chairlift so far. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, you know, and then I get the answer. Oh yeah, this is all up here in my head. It's not coming from my gut or anywhere else in my body. So I get on the chairlift and I go and have a great time and just choose to be in the excitement of the day.
So what you're saying, you know, and being a psychic and born that way, and, you know, a lot of our clients are, you know, intuitives, and for them, knowing what's their responsibility and where are their boundaries, where do they begin and end. So, I mean, lots of psychics really can't distinguish that. So they're running absolutely everything from, you know, the person to their personal stuff, their family stuff, their societal stuff, the collective unconscious stuff, the planetary stuff, and, you know, and the galactic stuff is all, there's no boundaries there. So they think we're responsible for all of it and they're overwhelmed. So how did you make sense of all of this so that you didn't continue to disassociate in a you know, dysfunctional family? How did you begin to establish boundaries for yourself, and what do you suggest for other, you know, highly intuitive or psychic people? How do they do it for themselves?
Okay, very good question, Tyson. And I've written about this in my first book, I Think I'm Psychic and You Can Be Too.
Right.
And it was a struggle. I made all the mistakes. I didn't have a guru or a mentor. And finally, I was getting psychically attacked. And I was having dreams where I was being picked up and spun. And I just, well, this doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. And it felt like I'd come to the end of the road where I needed to protect myself and have some boundary. So I did go and see somebody in Vancouver, a psychic researcher. And he looked at me and he said, oh, yes, you're wide open. So he gave me some tools just to kind of close off. And, you know, coming from a family where my mother was narcissistic, so she always wanted me to be taking care of her energy. So I was very attached. We were very attached. And I had to disassociate from her. But it's not to say that when I'm disassociated, I'm not still looking at you and can see you, but I'm not in your energy and you're not in mine.
Right.
And, you know, in answer to the second part of your question, that's why I teach psychic development workshops now for people who are very empathetic, who feel everything, who have dreams that are wild, or they just see and hear things that they don't know what to do with. I teach them in the workshops, first thing, do no harm and ground and protect. That's the first thing. And then we can get into the business of being, how are you psychic? What do you want to do with it? How do you manage it? How do you switch it off? How do you switch it on?
Right.
For myself, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah. Those are really important. How to switch it off, you know, how to sort of turn it up like a restart. So you're not, And then you're going to say for yourself? What was
so I was just going to say, people often ask me, you know, how do you manage that? You know, can you pick up everything? And I go, no, I'd probably be in a straitjacket and a loony bin by now if I did.
Yeah.
So I have a very strict rule with myself when I'm doing a reading, when I'm doing a workshop or a past life regression, whatever I'm doing, I'm open. And then the minute the client leaves, I shut it down. And that allows me to stay healthy, and I go back into my energy. And I trust that person, no matter what they're dealing with, they're on the path, they have their guides and angels to help and support them, and they'll be okay as long as I can help them, empower them to listen to those angels and guides by listening to their inner voice, their intuition, their intuitive intelligence.
I would agree with you totally. I do the same thing, you know. maybe 15 minutes before the client, I have the session with the client, it's like somebody's turning a switch on and I get sort of a precursor to it. Then I'm in the session, I'm totally, the divine flows through and the guidance comes. And then, like you say, when the session is over, it's like closing the book. It's done.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
And I needed to do that for myself, so I wasn't on 24/7.
Well, I don't know about you, Tyhson, but I find that my friends are the worst because we'll be having a conversation on the phone and we'll be talking about just life and what's going on, and they'll suddenly say, well, Natasha, what do you get about this? And I'll just say, whoa, I'm not in psychic mode right now. We're having a conversation. If you want to know that, you've got to book an appointment.
Good for you. I like that. That's a great response. So back over to the topic of grief.
Yes.
It sounds like you're going to be writing a book about that. Have you already started the book?
Well, I'm writing a book on intuition at the moment. And one of the chapters is on grief and intuition and talking about this. But I think there's enough there, Tyhson. Mm-hmm. And I love to gather other people's stories about, how they deal with the grief or how they feel when they're in the grief, or where they try to get back to themselves, but all this stuff got in the way. So this first book on intuition is very mainstream. It's for everybody. I want businesses to be able to really bring it into the workplace. Mm-hmm. I want children to have it in schools. I want women's organizations to have it. Everybody. It's for everybody. There's no religious or gender or national bias here at all. It's just about being human, and us all having this sixth sense that it's been given to us for a reason. But the grief book will come later.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any sense of what some of the chapters might be, or some of the topics may be around grief, because it's really interesting to think about, grief as almost a precursor of you can step up to the plate and deal with this, and then you'll have more psychic energy flowing through that you can trust. Is sort of really what, if I'm understanding correctly, the universe is telling us through the grief.
Yeah, I would like to actually say, and I've been saying this to a lot of my clients, that I feel the next 3 years on the planet, that the dark and the light forces are kind of duking it out.
Yeah.
And, that people are individually choosing, do I want to go towards light, or do I like hanging out in the dark? Because maybe in the short term it's more interesting, more fun, but in the long term it's definitely not. And so, we've talked before about this increase in suicides. It's been 25% over 10 or 12 years. And, I feel like these people might be, I'm not suggesting this is always the case, but these might be people who are loaded down with old grief. And when they're also sensitive or empathic or, open to being intuitive, they're very vulnerable to these forces coming in and just saying, come on, let's go deeper into the abyss. And that's very tough. It's very, very tough for a lot of people right now. So that's why I'm feeling the sense that this needs to be talked about and be brought out into the open, because at least then we can share it. And like I say, when we share it, it gets diluted and it doesn't have that power over us.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're in this transformation and change as new earth births itself. There's going to be pain, just like in any childbirth. And there's going to be choices to be made, whether you want to be overwhelmed and stick in the pain, or whether you actually want to birth yourself along with the planet. But you're going to experience that grief, or, oh my gosh, something is happening to me. It's interesting. I have a friend who's been interviewed on this show, and she lives in joy almost 24/7. And I said, well, how did you do this? Or she said it was just a choice. And she said it felt so good when I made that choice, I just continued to choose it. And so it can be that simple. We're not saying that, it seems overwhelming to deal with the grief, but once you actually get a handle of it and understand it, then choosing something that brings you joy, brings you ease and grace, who doesn't want that really in their life? Especially like you in that transformation where it can be overwhelming. The other point
Yes.
that I think is that, like there's so much going on, what's false news and all the rest of that. And, we're going to have 5Gs coming on now, which is really, the same vibrations of is psychic warfare and can be mind altering. So we're going to be more and more bombarded with these external forces, whether we want to or not. So if we're vulnerable and open and we're psychic, then we're going to be running all those energies, which are counterproductive to ourselves. And also, as the forces that want to keep the matrix in place are going to want to make sure that the psychics on the planet, can't get their guidance. So, we don't want to get into all of that conspiracy, but the point is you really need to manage your energy system, which is really the bottom line, right? We want you to be the best that you can be, to take back your power, stand in your truth, which is really what I teach clients. And you're giving them some of the precursors to the warnings of why does this show up and what can you do about it. So I think where you're going with this is really, like you say, this is the time where this information needs to be out and to help people make the sort of decisions that will bring out the best in them and the best for the planet too.
Well, I'd like to say something. This is it's on topic, but I'd like to say something about ghost busting as well. I watch a lot of these shows just because it's interesting for me, of course. And I notice how people say, oh, I've got a ghost in my house. And I go, well, have you asked the ghost if you can help it? Or could you bring somebody in to help the ghost? Because maybe the reason that ghost is slamming doors and you're hearing footsteps or things are getting moved is they're trying to get your attention. And they're actually invisible and they're in their own form of grief, but they've left their body. And so that's what they're trying to do. And I'm from England. Don't know if you can hear it anymore. My accent has kind of gone out the window. But I realized when I went back to the UK one summer, I always felt it was oppressive. And I used to think, oh, it's the weather. But I realized there's so many ghosts in England that go back so long. And then I think about all the wars that have happened on the planet and all the fights and all the misery and everything where people have stayed stuck. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying to everybody is I don't believe that humanity can really move forward because we've got this it's like an ionosphere of grief around the planet, and we can't rise through that until we acknowledge it and release it, and we have to be willing to release it.
Oh, absolutely. This is the whole area of geomancy as well, as all that grief and pain and suffering is locked right into the geopathic stress lines in the earth, right? And,
yes.
And the waterways. And, as the vibration of the earth increases, all of that energy that's trapped is starting to be released. So we have disincarnate beings, entities, lost souls, looking for the light. They're going to come to those that have light. And you're either going to be, open to that in the sense that your auric field is open and be inhabited by all these new tenants.
Yes.
Having a landlord-tenant relationship established, you could be overwhelmed. And they're going to come to you to be assisted, like you say, to have a conversation about, hey, do you know that you can go to the light? Or do you know that you're trapped on the third dimension? Or do you know that there's possibilities? So
yes,
this is part of what I would call planetary cleanup, or being
exactly.
an Earth steward, is being responsible for all of, not only this dimension, but the underworld dimension as it starts to clear itself, of
right.
all those souls find
yes.
a home.
Yeah, yes.
Absolutely.
And if people can just start with themselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Clear your basement out.
Yeah, because if they clear themselves, and this is something else I talk about, going back in the lineage of the ancestry, when a client, say, for example, they've got addiction in the family and they clean up, and they really clean up, the ancestors are breathing a huge sigh of relief because they know that when they come back again, they're not going to have to pick that up again and redo it. So it's always a kind of a line, a collective line of pain or joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the Tao, they say it this way. They say, that it goes back 5 generations and goes forward 9 generations. So
Wow.
I don't know what the figures would be like that, but I would think when you put all those souls together, we're in, what, 30,000 plus souls. So the point
Yes.
that we're trying to make, whatever that magic number is, when you clear yourself,
Yes.
you're doing it for your ancestors and you're doing it for your lineage. So
Yes.
what could be better than that,
Exactly. And then, having the intuition without any grief, it's just like, to me, the information is kind of plain as day. And actually now I say to myself, I don't need to make any decisions because there are no decisions to be made. It's not really an either or. It's just wait and get the information. If I can't make a decision, or another person can't make a decision, it might mean that I don't have all the information yet. So if I wait a little bit longer, some other piece of this jigsaw puzzle will come to me and it'll just be obvious that's the way I need to go. And it's right. It's always right. So it's about trusting the process. We're all lemmings, like trying to rush to the edge here. And it's like I'm saying, just stay put. Go watch a TV show. Go play a game of golf. It will come to you.
That's really important, and this is a whole nother topic that we should probably do another show on, and is how do you use this to manage your business, because it's counterproductive to what we're being taught, that
Yes.
you head down and push hard, and then you have to have an agenda and you have to have the time schedule all figured out and whatever. And what you're really saying, I'm going to see if I can interpret it, if it doesn't feel right, if you're struggling with the decision, then it's probably not the right time and place to make it, and it's better to play golf or go sit in a chair and meditate or do something else. But we're so addicted that we have to think that we have to do at least something to make it work. So we sit on our desk and burn ourselves out doing busy work, when in actual fact, if we had gone and played golf or meditated, we would have had an aha, and it would have been done and over with.
Exactly. When I don't know, I do nothing.
I love that. When I don't know, I do nothing. I'm going to put that down in my motto. When I don't know, nothing.
You can also quote the Book of Runes, Tyhson. It says, we do without doing and everything gets done.
Yeah, I like that as well. And if it doesn't bring you joy and happiness, don't do it. Again, that's back to your feeling.
Yes. And really, when you're in that highest frequency and you're feeling that love and that joy and that the world is a magical, beautiful place, you will attract that magic and beauty to you. And all the other dark stuff is just going to pass on by. It's not going to come anywhere close to you. So it's just about staying in that frequency.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and hopefully people will come to you, and then you can help them understand how to stay in this frequency so it becomes their way of dwelling and working through their daily life questions and answers, and also to put their business into a more, holistic approach, so it isn't as crazy making as it is for most people, which leads to burnout or disease and suffering. So,
well, Tyhson, I just wanted to mention this because you brought up business. You must be psychic, because I'm actually in the process of taking all my workshops and applying them to business and creating some online courses so that people in business can do their own workshops or bring me in to do seminars with them.
Yeah, I've always wanted to take my ability to teach people the dials into business so that they can make really better decisions by teaching them how to achieve guidance. Dowsing just is, I call it training wheels for guidance on demand. But it would be a way that, that they can make decisions to get out of their head, which does, gets them into problems. So great talking to you, Natasha. So how do people get to work with you?
Well, they can go simply to my website, natasharosewood.com. If they want an appointment, they can book through the website, or they can contact me at my email, natasha@natasharosewood.com, or call me or text 778-558-2832. And I'm just so you know, on this Saturday, November 17th, I will be at Divine Inspired Gifts and Gallery in Glenmore in Kelowna. from 1 till 4 offering readings. And I'll be again there next week doing a talk on manifestation, and in December 6th, Thursday, on how to use your intuition to manifest what you really want. So contact Divine Inspired for all that.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And just as we wrap up, I have to say I've had readings with Natasha, and she is the real deal. And what we've talked about in those readings is actually bearing fruit and coming to fruition. So I really, really encourage you, if you want to have an idea about where to put your energy and how to have more joy and ease and grace in your life and be more relaxing into it, Natasha can give you a bit of a look into what possibilities are so that you can actually let that manifest into your life. So Natasha, it was great to have you back on the show. Great topic, and all the best. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Tyhson. God bless.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.
This is your host, Tyhson Banighen, the Luminator, your #1 health, wealth, and enlightenment activator. Need some help? Give me a call toll free, 1-866-369-7464.
For quality online wellness products, courses, and services, visit our sponsors, thewellnessstore.ca and the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy located at thewellnessacademy.ca. To stay in touch, visit us at thewellnessshow.ca. And until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.